Bible Worm, reading the Bible with Bible Worm.
Welcome to Bible Worm, getting to the core of the biblical text. I'm Dr. Amy Robertson, Director of Lifelong Learning and Music at Congregation Or Hadash in Sandy Springs, Georgia.
And I'm Dr. Robert Williamson, Professor of Religious Studies at Hendrix College and Theologian in Residence of Canvas Community in Little Rock, Arkansas. We're here every week to discuss the biblical text, both as biblical scholars and as people of faith, one Jewish and one Christian.
Today we are reading John chapter 18, verses 28 through 40. Jesus has been brought to the Roman authority by the religious authorities, and all the authorities mostly seem eager to just make this situation go away. The story made us wonder, why is it so very hard to say what is true? How can it be that the intersection of religion and political power in this story seems to make that even harder? We might think that in a criminal case, one would focus on establishing the facts, and that in a religious system, getting to the truth of things would be first and foremost on everyone's mind. But in this story, that is not what's true, and we can only wish this bore no resemblance to the world we know. Hey, Bobby, it is good to see you.
Hey, Amy, it's good to see you too.
Bobby, our text today makes my stomach hurt a little bit.
Yeah, I was thinking about you as I was reading for today.
So I'm glad you are the one to read this text with me. Maybe you are not glad that I'm the one to read this text with you, but I feel like I can just say all the things and wonder all the wonderings, and I think that's what I have on deck for today.
Yeah. So we're reading John 18, 28 to 40, in which the Jewish leaders are portrayed in a very negative light, leading ultimately to the death of Jesus, which historically speaking has led to a lot of Christian persecution of Jews. Like, this is a tough text. And so I will say it would be easier for me to read this text with someone who is not you, in the sense that maybe we just wouldn't talk about it then. Like, I feel like but the fact of having to think about how uncomfortable it makes me to read these texts with you and have that's important work for somebody who's going to take these texts and try to make them make sense to my community, just to acknowledge what's going on in these texts.
Sometimes it is. I could see how this will really force both of us to wrestle with the most difficult parts of this text.
Yes. So thank you for undertaking that endeavor.
Thank you in advance for. I know you don't even know what you're in for here.
If this was not. Yeah.
Woo, okay.
You could have lived the rest of your life without reading this text.
I could have. We're picking up exactly after the verse where we left off last time. So we've just had Peter's threefold denial of having a connection to Jesus. The rooster has crowed. Is there anything else you would want to say to remind folks where we are?
The only thing is, they were headed to Caiaphas originally, the high priest, but the whole text last time they were talking with Annas, the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest. And so this text is going to begin with that ending of the Annas conversation, and they head off to Caiaphas, but they end up very quickly with Pilate. And so just keeping track of who they're talking to and why they're talking to them can become a little confusing in this text, but that's where we are.
Indeed. Well, shall we dive in then?
Yes, let's do.
Okay. I'm reading from the NRSV, and I am picking up in verse 28. Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. They themselves did not enter the headquarters so as to avoid ritual defilement and to be able to eat the Passover. So Pilate went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" They answered, If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you." Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and judge him according to your law." The Jews replied, "We are not permitted to put anyone to death." This was to fulfill what Jesus had said when he indicated the kind of death he was to die. Okay, so last week they had Jesus in conversation with someone who was referred to as the high priest, but seems to have been Annas for the whole time.
Right.
Who's not actually the high priest.
Right.
But the father-in-law of the high priest.
And the former high priest. He had previously been the high priest.
He had previously been the high priest, although I think Caiaphas had been the high priest for quite a while at this.
It seems like,
point.
yeah.
And then we don't get any, this verse just says they took him from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. Are you imagining that they stopped at Caiaphas's? They stopped at his place, but there was nothing to report from. It's just strange that there's nothing seems to have happened with Caiaphas.
It is strange. They never interact with Caiaphas in this text, who is the legitimate high priest. And I don't know, we had talked last time about maybe Caiaphas has Passover related duties.
He's busy.
So he's not available.
He's cleaning his kitchen.
Yeah, he's getting rid of all the chametz. Is that what it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think, we had talked a little bit about this whole thing, at least on the religious side, seems to be a little bit extrajudicial. Like there are procedures that we seem to be skirting a little bit.
For sure.
And Annas is carrying out like some power that is not officially vested in him.
Mm-hmm.
So there might be a way of thinking about that. But you're right. They take him to Caiaphas in that last text, but actually they just talk to Annas the whole time. And then now we're on our way to Pilate, and Caiaphas has never showed up in here anywhere.
Okay, so they go to Pilate, who is a Roman authority.
Yes.
Can you just ground me a little bit in what kind of Roman authority are we talking about?
Yeah, he's, Herod the Great, a little bit earlier, in the time of the birth of Jesus, when Herod was king, he was the king of all of Judea. When he died around the year 4 BCE, the Romans took direct control of Judea, Jerusalem, and divided Herod's kingdom into 4 parts, a tetrarchy, of which Herod Antipas is the king in Galilee, and Philip is sort of over in the northeastern part in the Transjordan. So they took direct rule of Jerusalem, Judea, and they put a Roman official, a governor there, in place of Herod, who had been king. Mm-hmm. And so that is Pilate at this point. We know about Pilate from other Roman sources. He was the governor in Judea from 26 to 36 CE, something like that. He was known as a pretty harsh and unforgiving ruler who was very strict and used military power as necessary to keep order. There was always a little bit of concern, especially around Passover, as I think we've talked about, which is sort of a nationalist holiday, an anti-imperial holiday, that there might be some unrest. And so Pilate, his reputation was just, he's not putting up with that. And at any sort of sign that maybe there was rebellion stirring, he would act to pretty quickly and harshly to put that down. We know about that from Josephus and Tacitus and other sources. So this biblical character, I think as he's portrayed in the Bible, kind of has, there's a historical record of him that matches up pretty well to the way he's portrayed here.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. Not just his role, but his reputation as being strictly keeping things in boundaries and sort of like keeping everyone in their hierarchical places, or however we might want to think about it.
One other thing that might be worth saying is that Pilate did not normally live in Jerusalem. His headquarters were in Caesarea Maritima, which was a Roman settlement on the Mediterranean coast, a really lovely place. And that's where he lived and had his headquarters. But at Passover and at other times of year, when there were lots of people coming into Jerusalem for festivals and such, he would come and take up his station in the Praetorium in Jerusalem, which is where he seems to be here.
Mm.
I don't know that really affects that much, but
to
me,
keep
it's just kind of
closer watch on things.
Yeah, I think just to keep a closer watch, or just a public show, like,
yeah,
like if the Roman governor is way over there on the coast, you feel one kind of a way maybe, but if he's just right there in the center of the city, so even if he's not actually watching, you sort of feel the threat.
You feel his presence.
Yes.
There. Okay, so they go to his headquarters, to this place where he stays when he is in Jerusalem. Do you know what it means when the text tells us they didn't enter the headquarters to avoid ritual defilement?
Well, I know what Christian interpreters say that it means, which is, you remember, we are on the day of preparation in the morning, at the conclusion of which, like the next sunset, that's going to be the Passover meal.
Mm-hmm.
And so the interpretation, I think, that John is giving us is the priests don't want to enter into the home or headquarters of a Gentile for concern about ritual impurity they might contract that would make them ineligible to celebrate the Passover. One of the commentaries I was looking at referenced a passage in Numbers. I can't remember quite. You might know this passage where second Passover Sheni is described.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why you might need Passover Sheni is if you've been on a journey. And so maybe there's an interpretation that if you've been in Gentile territory, you might end up impure in some way. And therefore, I was curious, though, what you would think about that, and whether whether the concern that John is expressing is a real concern or not.
Again, like, it's in some ways I'm like not the right Jew to be talking to about this, because this is like from a particular historical period. Yeah, I know that there were other places in the New Testament reporting what's happening in this period where there would be concern about like eating together with Gentiles or other things like that. So maybe they're just being very cautious to only be in spaces that are really sort of overseen by the Jewish community, so they're not worried about somehow encountering defilement. I don't have a great answer. And my study Bible just says very generally avoid ritual defilement by keeping their distance from areas occupied by Gentiles prior to the festival.
Yes. So these are important religious functionaries. And so it's not, I could imagine that you just maybe have a heightened sense of care about, you don't want to be unable to carry out the rituals at Passover and things such as that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So you're picturing that it's the priests, it is a group of priests who have brought him, not a group of soldiers.
There may well be soldiers involved, but my sense of it is...
But your sense is that there are also priests involved.
Right. Religious leaders. And in the Gospel of John, it's probably some priests, I would imagine. There are some Pharisees. We've seen in this gospel that the Pharisees exercise a lot of power in ways that are a little bit different than the other gospels. So that's kind of what I have in mind, is establishment religious elites. That's sort of the category.
Yeah. Okay.
This also creates a really interesting narrative structure in which Jesus is inside the Praetorium. The Jewish leaders are outside, not able to cross the gate. And so Pilate is going back and forth. So this text gives us this like shifting scenes inside and outside.
The whole thing is so interesting to me in terms of just how we imagine, a lot of things, but one of them is the relationship and the power dynamics between Pilate and the religious authorities of the Jewish community. Because even from the beginning, like, they show up at Pilate's headquarters early in the morning, like, which could have been quite early in the morning.
Right. Yes.
And Pilate comes out to them.
Yes.
Which just already was sort of, I guess, was not how I envisioned that would go. If
Yes.
Pilate is the, powerful governor that the leaders are worried about upsetting,
Yes.
that he comes out to meet them.
It creates this sort of visual representation of what is happening kind of narratively, which is Pilate really is caught in between
Yes.
the Jewish leaders and Jesus, who is kind of portrayed as a man of the people. And so you've got this tension of the leaders of the people and the hero of the people, and Pilate is caught in the middle of an argument and trying to figure out how to navigate it. And so the narrative that makes him go back and forth is kind of giving you a visual representation of what is his circumstance.
And I keep thinking back to Caiaphas's claim back in chapter 11 that the reason that they should even be considering this path that they are on is because there is a sense that it is in the best interest of the people, the Jewish people, that they don't have an uproar that would be caused by this one person, that there's a threat against the Jewish community from the Roman community, the Roman leadership. And so then to see it play out in this situation where Pilate seems kind of pulled in two directions.
Yes.
It feels, I don't know if I want to say in tension with that narrative, but it certainly is making it more complicated than that narrative.
That's interesting. I want to pay attention to that as we go.
So Pilate asks, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" And their answer, Bobby, these people, I have no patience for these religious leaders. "If this man were not a criminal, we would not have handed him over to you."
Right.
What kind of answer is that? What do you make of that? Why do they answer this way?
I mean, I used to think this was a ridiculous answer. I mean, I still kind of do, but I feel like we hear answers like this a lot in our current context.
Oh, we for sure do.
Right?
We for sure do.
Yeah, we wouldn't be arresting people if they weren't criminals. Well, but what charge do you bring against them? They're criminals. That's why we're arresting them. And, just to see that sort of here in this text as well.
Yes.
And this is kind of what people sometimes just say and do. If you go back to that passage you were referring to with Caiaphas, maybe this is a politically expedient execution that they're trying to carry out, and they don't have a clear charge, and so they're kind of obfuscating in that way. We can't actually tell you something that's going to make you want to execute him, so we're just going to tell you that he needs to be executed.
Yeah.
The things that the priests have mostly said about Jesus and the Pharisees in this text is that he's a blasphemer, which is a real concern religiously.
Yes.
But it's not a concern of Pilate's at all. He doesn't care even a little bit if somebody is blaspheming the Jewish God.
Right, the God of Israel, fine. Yeah.
What he cares about is whether somebody is a political threat to the stability of Rome. Yeah. And I don't know that they have any real evidence of that other than he raised Lazarus from the dead, which is what led to that Caiaphas saying it's better to sacrifice the one man on behalf of the people. But they can't say that, I don't think, to Pilate. We want to execute him because he raised someone from the dead. And so I think the one sort of accusation they could make is one that Pilate doesn't care about. And so they just say, trust us.
So you don't think that they could have said, we believe he is a political threat to the Roman government?
Well, then I think the question is how so?
Yeah.
To which I don't know what the response is. What would the response be? I guess the people were coming out of Jerusalem in that text that we have not yet read when Jesus came into Jerusalem as sort of triumphal entry. Mm-hmm. People were coming out to celebrate him as a king. That's an interesting question.
Well, no, I think what you're saying is exactly right, Bobby, is that it almost is Pilate starts one conversation, okay, this is the way this usually goes. And it's almost like the leaders who bring him there, they want to do something else. Like they're like, we have started this sort of like, I'm going to use the word ritual, but it's not a religious ritual, but we have these, sort of political rituals in our society too, just as you're saying, like once someone's arrested, they're a criminal, like that. It's not always sort of really an examination looking for the truth. And it seems like that's what they want. They just want Pilate to go down this road.
Yes.
They don't actually want to talk about what the accusation is or some kind of real investigation.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So when Pilate says, then you deal with this. Like,
Right.
Why'd you wake me up at 5:30 in the morning to bring someone to my front stoop and say, this is a criminal, but we're not going to tell you why?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think is, a fair question. And they say we're not allowed to put someone to death.
Mm.
Is that true?
There is an argument about this, and I'm sort of curious what you think. Like, they have almost stoned Jesus a couple of times in the Gospel of John, and he has escaped in various ways. And so it doesn't seem to be that they have been restricted from executing him in that particular kind of way legally.
Mm-hmm.
So one way that some people will read this as they're not allowed to crucify anyone, that is a Roman execution method that the Jews are not allowed to exercise. It's not clear to me why they themselves are particularly invested in that. Verse 32 says, this is because Jesus said he was going to be lifted up. So
yes, I understand it sort of in that, on that level.
So he's got to be crucified for his own prophecy. Yeah. They're not allowed to crucify, so they want Pilate to do it. But I don't understand exactly why they themselves are like, they don't care that Jesus' prophecy is fulfilled, right?
Right.
Maybe it's what you were saying, like they want. I mean, I think religious leaders sometimes function this way in the sense of they need him out of the way, but they don't want to be responsible for it.
Right.
And that's kind of what you were thinking before.
Yeah, it is always striking to me in this story how much it seems like no one is really committed. Like, no, like I don't know. There's a lot of passing the buck, sort of back and forth in this story in a way that is very disturbing to me.
Yeah, I think that is totally fair. And I think that is the way it often is in the world.
I think it is. And that's probably part of why it is so disturbing to me, because we still do this.
Yes. And if religious powers then and now can ally with the government in ways that the government does the things the religious community finds expedient,
feel they ought not to do, but they sure wish would happen.
That's the way I think this text is playing out.
Yeah. Right.
And Pilate is saying, just do, like, what concern is this of mine? And the way that I have read that line from Pilate is, if this guy is a political threat to Rome, then that's my worry. Like, I'm concerned about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's something else, then you have your own law, you have your own punishments.
Right.
I'll stay out of it. You go do it. And so Pilate has kind of put it back in their court.
Right.
So to speak. Put it back in their court was a tennis reference, but it actually was also.
But exactly, and they don't want it back in their court. Like it's just like they both sides don't really want to engage with this.
Right.
It's just so hard. It's so painful to read this depiction of religious leadership in general and Jewish religious leadership, just as a Jewish person, and also knowing how this plays out in history, and also knowing that Jews, like all people, have the same capacity for avoidance and cruelty as, it's just, I don't know what actually transpired on Pilate's front stoop, but this depiction really is deeply distressing to me.
Yes. I appreciate your saying it that way. And in my mind, especially for Christian readers like myself who are working on this text in the modern context, we should not at all be thinking like, look at the things that the Jewish leaders did, but rather thinking about the ways in which the centralized establishment religion allies with power to carry out things sort of extrajudicially, which in our current context is largely about things that Christians are doing.
Yeah.
And so to think about not like, oh, aren't they terrible? The question is like, look at what people are doing in the name of our religion, and how are we going to address that? And we've tried to say all the way through this gospel, but it's so easy to lose it, that what we're talking about when we say the Jewish leaders or the Jews in this text is not regular folks in their synagogues trying to live their life the best way they can with their family as faithful Jewish people. It's the elites who are trying to figure out how to...
Right. It's the mingling with religion, with power.
That's exactly it.
That trips us up every time.
It is. Exactly. And in the U.S. context, right now, that is a Christian problem.
Yep. Yes.
And we would do well to pay attention to it we Christians would do well to pay attention to it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially when there is an intermingling of religion and power, and also some claim, I don't know how to assess that claim, but some claim or self-understanding of not having power.
Yes.
I feel like that is just another twist in the story that leads to these kinds of weird avoidant conversations.
Yes.
That is like what we're seeing between Pilate and these leaders.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reverend Sharon Reese, and I pastor a small congregation in Minden, Nebraska. After hearing Amy and Bobby speak at a conference, I became a Bible Worm supporter and passionate about the narrative lectionary. Each week, as the solo pastor in a rural church, it is a reminder that we are never alone in our discernment of God's holy word. Bobby and Amy demonstrate how Scripture is something we interact with and not just read. Recently, my congregation and I used their Creation Care Summer Series and loved it. During each service, we drew small pieces of creation until we had a completed creation banner in the sanctuary. Everything from the stars in the firmament to the lilies in the field. If the podcast has been as fruitful for you as it has for me, please go to patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast and sign up to become a supporter too. And now, back to this week's episode.
Well, I'm sure the story is going to get better from here.
You know, we're headed toward a crucifixion, right? So I think the slope may be downward.
All right, you ready to go on?
Yeah.
I'll pick up in verse 33. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" What do you think Pilate's sort of go-to first question is, "Are you the king of the Jews?"
My reading of that, like no one has invoked that title here, right? The Jewish leaders didn't say that. They didn't really say anything. My read of it is that is the thing Pilate cares about. The thing that he wants to know is, are you a political revolutionary who is seeking to be the king or to be the leader of the people? And so that's the question that he asks. And if the answer is no, then he doesn't care so much.
Yeah.
That's maybe not the most profound reading.
No, and I think that makes sense, that he would ask the question that this is the accusation that he would care about.
Right.
And it makes me wonder too if there were other claims to that title around that time, other kinds of insurrections within the people that were based on this idea, this messianic waiting.
Yeah, the first century was a very tumultuous period, as you well know. And one of the things to keep in mind, too, is that while the story that we are reading takes place somewhere around 30 CE, the narrative events, the gospel itself is usually dated to around 90, which is after the Jewish revolt against Rome.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were revolutionaries and messianic claimants all through that period. And so whether or not Pilate actually dealt with that, I don't know.
We don't know.
But it seems reasonable in a story set in this context that would be the thing people were worried about.
What do you think is in Jesus's heart or mind when he presses Pilate and asks what he asks? Do you ask me this on your own, or did others tell you about me? Like, is he trying to get at, is he wondering, is he just sort of like cool as a cucumber in this situation and wondering, what do my followers understand about me? Like, what is the buzz about me? Or is he really sort of present in this interaction with Pilate and trying to, I don't know, reason with him or something else?
I read Jesus. So you use the phrase "cool as a cucumber," I think.
Yeah.
That is exactly the way that I read Jesus. Like, he is not breaking a sweat.
Yeah.
He's in charge of this conversation in his own way.
Mm.
In an interesting way, he's kind of trying to uncover the truth. Like, has there been an accusation made against me, or are you kind of grasping at things?
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like, he's not going to say yes. Right? Because he doesn't, like, that is not a title that he's interested in for himself, as we will see. I don't know why he doesn't just say no. I guess because he wants the events that are playing out need to play out.
Yeah.
Although it's not exactly true that he's not the king of the Jews either.
I mean, he gives the sort of like the Jesus version of that answer after this. My kingdom is not from this world. So like, depends what you mean by king. But yeah, so we can move on to that. I'm just curious why he wants to know why Pilate's asking that.
Yeah. When I read that as what he's saying is, did the Jewish leaders who handed me over to you tell you that?
Uh-huh.
You seem to be sort of reading it as like, did my followers tell you that?
I am wondering where Jesus's like heart is as he is asking. Is he engaged fully in this conversation with Pilate, or is he kind of more still with his followers and is just, okay, this is playing out, but I wonder what my people understand about me. Like, is that of more interest to him than Pilate?
It's so interesting to me that you're reading that as his followers. That had never really occurred to me, but it's kind of interesting. I've just read it as he's got the Jewish leaders in mind, and maybe he's just kind of either trying to get them on the record or pointing out to Pilate that actually no one has accused him of anything. Or I read Jesus as being a little cagey here, more than I read him as being like genuinely interested in what anyone is really saying about him.
No, I think that is a good reading. I think that is a good reading. So then Jesus's answer to the question, are you the king of the Jews? Is this very sort of Jesus-y answer. Like, it's not exactly yes or no, but it's sort of, language means different things when I use it than when you use it. What would you say about his response?
Yeah. Can you read the very first sentence of his reply in the NRSV? The CEB has, my kingdom doesn't originate from this world.
Yeah, mine is pretty close. My kingdom is not from this world.
Yeah, it's so like, it's just a genitive expression there in Greek. And so, some people have read this as like, there are two parallel kingdoms and you're in charge of that one and I'm in charge of this one. And if you were in my world, I would fight you, but we're not. So don't worry about it. And the way that I am reading it is not that. It is, my kingdom doesn't originate from, like it is here in this world, but it has its origins outside of this world, but now it has mingled. And then what Jesus is saying is, if I were from your world, that is, if I followed the logic of earthly empires, my people would be fighting you right now. But we're not from a fighting place. We're from a place that operates by a whole different set of rules. And so we're here and our kingdoms are overlapping, but we're not fighting you because that's what earthly empires do.
Yeah.
That's not what heavenly kingdoms do, or however you want to think about that.
Bobby, I'm so glad that you pointed out that word from in here, like, because I had totally just read it as sort of like, my kingdom is not of this world.
Right.
Like I'm kind of on another plane,
Yeah.
but you're exactly right. And I'm even just looking at the English, that it's a question of origin, but it's not that his kingdom does not have power in this world. It's just, it's built on different things.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting right there is Jesus, I like the CEB here. He says, if it did originate from this world, then he says, my guards would fight so that I would not have been arrested by the Jewish leaders. Sometimes that's translated as my followers would fight. But the word there is actually the same word that's used for the guards who arrest Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. And in that story, Peter does pull out his sword and try to fight. And Jesus says, no, that's not what, like, they've got their guards, or some translations have their police do it this way, but my police are not fighting police. And so he had to stop Peter from fighting, because then he's inhabiting the wrong kingdom.
Yes.
I just think that language is really interesting about the guards or the police or however you want to think about them. The ones of the empire, they're fighters. The ones of the kingdom of heaven, they do not fight. That is not what they do.
That's so interesting on its own, but also then leading into this next thing that Jesus says, that I came into the world to testify to the truth.
Yes.
Maybe this should be like a capital T kind of truth.
Yes.
And so we can hold it in that light. But before we even get to that light, I think just that to be willing to speak what is true has proven enormously difficult to, like, just in these past couple stories, like Peter was willing to cut off that guy's ear, but then could not just say the thing that is true, which is that I am a disciple of Jesus. And then here in this exchange between the religious authorities and the Roman authorities, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in getting to what is actually true. Like they're doing some kind of political dance to try to make things go in a way that is beneficial to all of the powers at play. But I wouldn't say truth is really at the heart of any of it, small t or big T.
I love that observation, Amy. And it goes back to what we were saying before when Pilate says, what are the charges you bring against him? They're like, charges. What does it matter what the charges are? And so you're exactly right. There has been no interest in truth. And it's so interesting that the transition there in 37 is Pilate says, so you are a king. Because Jesus says, my kingdom isn't from here. And then Jesus is skirting that question. You say I'm a king. I tell you I'm a truth testifier. And so I think Jesus is disinterested in that title of king.
Yes.
in a passage we didn't read in John 6, after Jesus feeds the 5,000, the people try to make him a king, and he hides from them. But he may also be making a distinction between kings and truth-telling, right? So it is in the nature of kings that they don't tell the truth.
Yeah.
I am a truth-teller.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus has also claimed to be the truth. In another text that we didn't read, Jesus says, I am the way and the truth and the life.
Mm-hmm.
In John 14:6. And so in this interesting way, Pilate is like speaking with the truth, like the truth embodied according to John's gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't realize that's what he's doing. He thinks he's talking to a king. Yeah. So there's a lot going on here about kings are not interested in truth.
Right.
Political leaders are not interested in truth. Jesus is truth. He doesn't want to claim to be a king.
Yeah.
That line that Pilate says next, where he's just like, what is truth?
I know.
How do you read that?
Okay, so let me ask and it sort of layer another question on that. In the English translation, we've been talking about the truth.
Yeah.
When Pilate asks, my translation just has, what is truth?
Yes.
What do you do with that?
So he's not saying like, of these many claims to the truth, which one is actually true?
Yeah.
He's like saying, what is
it? Like, what do you mean?
What does that even mean?
Is it like a rhetorical question? Is this some kind of philosophical question? Like, nothing is true? Is it like he's like an existentialist, or like?
Yeah.
I don't know how to read it other than that it makes so clear that Jesus is just having a totally different conversation than these folks who are around him.
I think that's right. Jesus is talking about something, and Pilate does not get what he's talking about. I think the options you said is Pilate an existentialist, and I think that is one way of reading it, that Pilate is kind of in the model of like a Marcus Aurelius or something, like a philosopher king who's like, what is the truth? What is truth? Or you can read him as like a propagandist who's like, what is truth?
Right.
And people have read him both ways. I am, especially today, tending to read him in the second of those ways, that he's not actually that interested in what is true in this arrest. I mean, what he's interested in is like, what is politically expedient? What is the best? How can I get this situation handled in a way that doesn't cause me more trouble? And that will become increasingly clear as we read on.
Right.
So the question of like, what is true here hasn't really occurred to him, or it's not the motivating factor anyway. And so that's what I read Pilate is saying. It's like, who cares about truth?
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's the right way to read that. Sure.
No, I mean, I think that makes good sense from what we've seen here, and certainly has a lot of sort of life and energy in it for our time. It's just so stark.
Yeah.
It is stark. All right, let's read the last little bit of text that we have for today, picking up in the middle of verse 38. After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, I find no case against him. But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews? They shouted in reply, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a bandit.
I love the word bandit. The CEB has outlaw, which is like,
he wasn't. I pictured that. I know he has like a little red bandana around his neck. And,
exactly. Yeah. He's a cartoon dog in my current mental image. I don't quite, with the red bandana on. I don't quite know. Probably means I have young children. That's probably what that means.
Bobby, this whole thing's a sham. This statement, I find no case against him.
Right?
What attempt has he even made to find a case against him? Like he asked him, are you king of the Jews? And Jesus gave some confusing answer, and then he went back out. Like that was, he's not, no one's even trying to make a case about anything here.
I appreciate the way you just said that, Amy, because I think maybe we didn't quite name it, but in that previous interaction, what Jesus has basically said in answer to that question, are you the king of the Jews, is I am not a threat to you. Right? Like what Jesus says is my people don't fight.
Yes, that's right.
And so now Pilate doesn't care anymore, right? So in a sense, he hasn't figured out anything, but what he has figured out is Jesus is not a threat to him.
Yeah.
And so there's no case. Like I don't care anymore.
It's not in his bed. This is not his problem. He doesn't have a problem.
Yeah. So he hasn't found truth. He has found political expediency, and that's what he's got. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But then he still doesn't let him go.
That's true. He still doesn't let him go. He offers the religious leaders the opportunity to have him released.
Yes.
I don't even understand what this means. You have a custom that Rome releases someone for you? Okay, we'll talk about that in a minute. But he could just release him.
Right.
Why doesn't he?
I mean, this is a great question. And the best answer that I've got is the last time Jesus was free, Pilate got waked up at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
And had to deal with all these questions about truth. And he's like, if I let this guy go again of my own volition,
they're going to do it again.
It's just going to keep coming back to me. It's going to be a headache. And so if they decide release him, then Pilate, the next time they come back, he just says, look, you told me to release him. What can I do?
Right.
But if Pilate decides to release him, it's going to keep being a problem for him. That's the way that I read it. It's a little bit of a snarky reading. That's not quite the
I don't know how to read this part of the story without reading snark on both sides. Just like both of them, Jesus is a headache to everybody, and they're both trying to get the other side to deal with it because they don't want to.
And this sort of he recognizes, he hasn't exactly said that Jesus is innocent, but he's kind of said that. I don't find any grounds for a charge. You haven't told me what the charge is.
Right.
I don't find any grounds for a charge. That's pretty close to Jesus is innocent.
Yeah.
But he's still going to pursue what he's going to pursue. He's going to keep him in prison. He's going to execute him. Spoiler alert. And so we also have this kind of Pilate, the Roman official, is willing to execute people who he knows there's no basis for charges against them. Right. And so it's implicated him in this thing in its own way. The religious leaders are implicated in one way. Pilate is implicated in a different way. They both bear guilt in some sense, even though they're trying to push it off on each other.
How do you understand, literally, how do you understand this? You Jewish community or you Jewish religious leaders have a custom that I, the Roman governor, release someone for you at the Passover.
This is going to sound a little questionable. But what is reminding me of is Thanksgiving and the president pardons a turkey. It's sort of like that, except instead of a turkey, it's somebody who actually is imprisoned. And it's just sort of an actual human. Yeah. That the Roman governor has agreed to do.
Happy Passover.
The only place that we know anything about this idea that this is the custom at Passover is from the New Testament Gospels. And we don't know about it from other places. And so this may be a way that Christians talked about the story. This might have been a custom, but we don't have any evidence for it from elsewhere. But it's kind of an interesting, just even if it's not a historical custom, it's still literarily, it's sort of an interesting, I mean, what it communicates from the perspective of Rome is we have the power over life and death. This is the power of clemency, right? It's the power of unrestricted pardons. I can release whoever I want. And I'm I'm giving you a chance to exercise that power on my behalf. So you pick somebody. It's really interesting when you think about And we're in a historical moment in which pardons are being used in a particular kind of way to reward people with particular kinds of loyalties. And so if you think about this in that light, then here we've got two powerful groups of political, religious figures, and they're using this power of pardon.
Yes.
Sort of between them in this sort of tense but tacit agreement.
Yeah. That is exactly, you put your finger right on it, Bobby. It's the power dynamics of it that are really interesting to me here. And just trying to wrap my head around what is the relationship between these two different leaders or groups of leaders, and in what ways could, exactly as you're saying, could granting a pardon be actually an act of power and not an act of grace or
right.
It's a gift, but it's also a gift that points to your own power.
Yeah. The word that's used for Barabbas there, bandit or outlaw, is lestes in Greek. And there's an argument about what exactly that means. One fairly popular argument is that those were political revolutionaries, like sort of guerrilla warriors or something like that. So power to the people kind of idea. And so they're releasing somebody of that nature. But the word in Greek, in the New Testament and elsewhere, is used more generally than that, of people who have done some stuff, right? So it covers a whole range of bad activities, including like murder and all these kinds of things. So I don't know how far to read that as like they're releasing a political revolutionary versus they have innocent Jesus against whom no charge can be found.
Right.
And the guy who has been rightfully convicted of having done some bad stuff.
Right.
And for reasons, they choose to release the outlaw and keep the innocent person in prison. That word, interestingly, is also a reference. Well, I don't know. It is also used in the passage we read for Ash Wednesday in John chapter 10, in which the sheepfold, there's a gate which the good shepherd comes through, but bandits jump over the fence.
Oh, wow.
This is that word. I don't know if that presses anywhere.
It could. I can imagine a trail you could sort of follow, but I'm not sure how far it would go.
Do you want to start down it, or
just to sort of imagine, like, if this is that, if that's what he represents, that he's being released back into the fold, like he's been held out of the fold and he's being released back into the fold, which includes within it Jesus's followers and also a broader community. Kind of gets us back to that question of who exactly is in the flock, and is everyone in the flock intentionally there and sort of knows what they're doing, or are some of them just following along and are not really oriented towards the shepherd in the same way? Or
I think that's a really nice reading. And when you hold Barabbas and Jesus up and you refract it through that John 10, then what you've got is the outlaw who's jumped over the fence and the good shepherd standing side by side, and you've got a choice about which one to give back to the flock. And the religious leaders and the Roman imperial authority have chosen to let the outlaw, not the good shepherd. So at the end of the day, they seem not to actually have the interest of the flock in mind.
Yes. Bobby, this was a tough reading for me.
Yes.
Help me. What's rising up for you at the end of this conversation?
Yeah, it's a tough reading, and in an interesting way, it's kind of a tough reading for me this year in a way that kind of feels different to me, I think, than it did 4 years ago, just because of our historical context. And all of this about, the political expediency of the power to arrest and detain people, and who's interested in truth or not interested in truth, or is it purely about means to a political ends, and this kind of tensive relationship between religious leaders, which in the text are Jewish, but in the world right now are largely Christian, and the government, like it is putting a fine point on some realities that affect my community. It doesn't have the same historical resonance, of course, as the trouble that this text has given the Jewish community, but it feels I think, and maybe in a helpful way for me, it's putting me into sort of a squirmy position myself. What I'm drawn to in this text, first of all, is this statement that Jesus makes in verse 36 when Pilate says, "What have you done?" And Jesus says, "My kingdom doesn't originate from this world. If it did, my guards would fight." And as we talked about before, the way that I read that is not this sort of like heaven is over there and earth is down here, and heaven doesn't care what happens on earth, or never the two shall meet, but it means it comes from a different place. It's not born of the imperial logic, but it is very much present in the world today. But the followers of my way, the followers of the kingdom of heaven, don't use violence in the ways that the followers of the Roman Empire and the followers of the empire of the world do. And even in defense of themselves, which sometimes is hard for me, like true pacifism is, I think, where my heart lies, but sometimes I can't get my brain all the way there. But that's the sense in this text, is even when the life of the truth, Jesus, is on the line, it is still, my guards don't do that. It's a way of love, and a way of truth-telling, and a way of representing what is godly in the world. And so I think there's it's just a powerful idea to me, but a real invitation to those of us who try to be followers of that way, to think of ourselves in that way, as people who witness to the truth without violence. And both of those pieces, I think, are really important, the witness to the truth and the without violence.
Yeah.
And as we've talked about along the way here today, the lack of interest in truth for political expediency. There is no one in this text who is speaking what is true, except Jesus, who is the truth in the understanding of John, but no one else. So being willing to say what is true and what we know to be true, and to receive the consequences that the empire has in mind for us, that even as part of what it means to tell the truth, without responding in violence. That seems to be what's at the heart of this text. Jesus does it in a way that seems hard to live up to for me, but nonetheless that offers a model of maybe what is expected or hoped for out of the followers of Jesus. That's what I'm seeing in this text today.
Yeah, I think that resonates so deeply with this text and with the text that we read last week, where I just got such a really human illustration of someone who intends to live following the truth, but so quickly we start, I don't know, strategizing or convincing ourselves that like at this moment right here, it's okay to not tell the truth because of something in the future. And these texts are really pressing us to say like, no, not in this moment either.
Yeah.
Not to prolong the future. No.
Yeah. I really appreciate your consistently reminding me of last week's text, because it's been a week since we read that one. And it's not just the religious leaders and Pilate who are not telling the truth here, but also Peter did not tell the truth for very different reasons. And a way I can empathize with much more easily. Yeah, me too. What about you, Amy? What are you seeing in this text this week?
Oh, Bobby, I love to empathize with people in this text and all the people that no one else wants to empathize with. And I think that is part of why this reading was so excruciating for me, is that I just can't find a foothold anywhere.
Yeah.
And I think you are right that it is lifting up something really true about the way that human systems tend to work, that once we attain positions of power, even if I want to give the benefit of the doubt, we come into those positions of power because we genuinely care about the best interests of people and we're seeking the best version of the truth we can. And like, even if someone comes into leadership with all those things in mind, it is just so easy once you are the leader for your goal to switch to staying in power. And then everything is about sort of expedience, or, how can we make this last longer? How can we get the dangers? And I don't know what it is. It's something about human nature plus political structures, or I don't know, something like that. And so that to me is like the tragedy of this part of the story, is that seems to me to be all anyone is doing besides Jesus.
Yeah.
All they're doing is this sort of dance around rules that they have kind of made up and are just, like making themselves feel that these things are okay, but no one is actually asking the real question at hand, which is, what is happening? Who is this man sitting before them? Has he committed a crime? Like, no one's talking about the thing that they claim to be talking about.
Yeah.
And as you have pointed out so eloquently, that is so often the position that we find ourselves in today. So this text is a reminder and a warning, I think, to us as humans against our apparent nature to fall into this trap. And it's hard to read.
One of the things I hear you struggling with is that there's not really very much hope in this text, and that often is our sort of orientation is toward like, what can we pull out that gives hope for the world? And, it's one of the quirks of the narrative lectionary in this year is that we spend a long time in the story of the crucifixion and the trial that leads up to it. And it's not a hopeful story. Like, the hope is going to come in the Christian context in another month when we read the Easter story, and it turns out life is more powerful than all of this. But I think this sort of lingering in the diagnostics and the warnings may just be where we are, given what this text is.
From some of the ways you've talked with me about Lent before, I can see this being an important prompt for self-reflection for communities during this period of time.
Yes.
Well, the title of next week's reading, as you have pointed out, does not really get better. Jesus condemned. John chapter 19, verses 1 through 16. We'll see what happens then.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll look forward to seeing you then. And I will look forward to seeing you then. A hard text to read together.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for this conversation, Bobby. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next week.
All right, Amy. See you then.
Bye. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Bible Worm. If you've enjoyed this free podcast, we hope you'll help us to keep it going by joining our Patreon for as little as $4 per month. You can also sign up for other goodies like early access, video lectures, weekly liturgies, and more. Visit patreon.com/BibleWormPodcast for details.
Bible Worm is produced and edited by Bobby Williamson. Our theme song is sung by Colin Bagby, and our theme music is The World at Large by Dano Songs. Many thanks to all our Patreon supporters for helping us make this podcast possible.
Join us again next time when we continue on with John chapter 19, verses 1 through 16a, where things are not going to get any easier. Until then, keep on digging.